So if Allah guides a person to Islam through you, you will get a lot of reward, but you're only going to get the reward if that person goes on to practice Islam and be a Muslim. So as long as they are praying and they're fasting and they're doing all those acts of ibadah, you actually share in that reward without that person's reward being diminished.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Shaikh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you for joining us. Wanted to discuss a few things. So, alhamdulillah, we've been benefiting from the Go Raps trainings, the whole Dawah model, and having lots of conversations, chats, and a lot of shahadas over the last few years. But if you start looking for the number of people who take the shahada and how many of them establish even one salah per week, that ratio is very low. And that's becoming sort of a concerning thing. So the idea is that what can we start doing from a mindset perspective, from an action perspective, to increase the retention rate, if you will. So I would like to ask you that when we are inviting people to Islam, what is our primary goal?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is why are you giving dawah in the first place? One of them, I guess there's two main reasons why one would give dawah. Two good reasons. Number one is to fulfill an obligation. And I suppose from that perspective, if you've given a person dawah, you've fulfilled your obligation of passing on the message, which is a good thing. But another very strong reason why people might want to get involved in dawah and get involved in it seriously in a persistent, consistent level is because of the rewards involved. But the rewards are ultimately really only linked to those people practicing Islam. So if Allah guides a person to Islam through you, you will get a lot of reward, but you're only going to get the reward if that person goes on to practice Islam and be a Muslim. So as long as they are praying and they're fasting and they're doing all those acts of ibadah, you actually share in that reward without that person's reward being diminished. So you have a real interest, a self-interest in protecting your investment, because you've invested a lot of energy and a lot of time, and actually a lot of people often have invested their energy and their time in producing the literature and all the stuff that goes to supporting the dawah that you're giving. So there is a real self-interest in terms of an ajr perspective of ensuring that not only do those people take shahada, but they stay Muslims and they are good Muslims who are persistent with following their religion. So I think that's the main reason that we have to make sure that we invest in looking after them properly.
Great. So also, if you take it back to the prophetic narration and doing dawah with ihsan and according to sunnah, is that you have, as the Prophet ﷺ explained to Mu'adh radiallahu anh, that if they accept the tawheed, if they do the shahada, then you tell them about the salah. Would that include following up and facilitation so that you encourage them to come to the salah and increasing their iman as to why they should pray and what's stopping them from prayer?
Well, I think, look, the environment in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when Mu'adh ibn Jabal was sent to be a governor of Yemen, was the situation of Muslims being the ruling power there. So obviously, Mu'adh had a type of authority, and there was a sort of, you could say, an aura where Islam was being established and practiced. How that's going to apply for us in the West or people who are giving dawah in not an environment like that's going to be different. So, but yeah, the general principle is still the same, is that that's what we want people to do, and that, without doubt, is the next most important thing. When, like I say, back in the days when I first became Muslim and I started to give dawah, some things were like what we call no-brainers for us. It's not something we thought about or planned it, we just did it. What was the point of us giving dawah if we weren't going to look after these people afterwards? So it wasn't, for us, it was like when a person became Muslim or they took shahada, that was the end of it. We weren't out there in Speaker's Corner giving talks and lectures, and that was it. Someone became Muslim, now our attention focused to that person. Or if there was enough of us, then someone would look after that person, take them to the mosque, teach them how to make wudu, and then we would be in touch with that person to support them. So by and large, generally, I don't remember that from the people who took Shahada, we lost that many of them.
Sure.
You know, we tend to be, you know, in touch with them and support them as much as we could. And I guess if the reason why they didn't persist is because they didn't want to, not because there wasn't a support system for them. And I think that's the main thing we have to make sure. It's, you know, like, okay, if they don't want to follow Islam because whatever they find it too difficult or whatever reason, I mean, that you can't, there's only so much you can do. But if we are failing to provide the support that they need, then that's something we should worry about, because we should worry from the perspective that maybe Allah is going to ask you about that on the Day of Judgment.
Great. So when you say support, do you mean that handing out your card to them and saying, hey, I'm here, call me, or just like how you reached out to them when they were walking?
It really depends upon the culture and the circumstances. You know, there may be a country or a place where that's all you need to do. And it depends on the dawah as well. It depends on how thoroughly and effectively that person has had Islam explained to them, and to what degree and to what level. And we've had all of these things. And when we started IERA, we've gone through so many experiences. There's an example of where we're giving dawah in a university. The brothers went through the whole go route. They gave him the dawah. The guy loved it. He said, "This is great." He took his shahada, and then the brothers were saying, "Okay, let's go and pray." And he said, "Prayer? What do you mean?" It was some French guy, and he was saying, "Prayer? What do you mean prayer? You know, what are you talking about?" And he just literally thought it was some philosophical idea that he was accepting. And then we realized that actually there was something missing from our dawah. We had to make it clear to them what becoming a Muslim actually entailed before we invited them to take the shahada. So again, it sort of depends a little bit upon how the dawah is given. So it's one of these things, how long is a piece of string? So the care is going to depend upon the person you are talking to, the environment in which you are in. The main thing is that you do need to have something in place, whether it's handing a card. That might work for some people. For other people, it may be you have to hold them by the hand, take them to the mosque. You might have to stay with them for 2 or 3 days. It really depends.
What do you think about the importance of continuing to talk about Allah? As we were talking about at the retreat sessions, to know Allah, that will encourage you to worship Allah, to love Him.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's only so much you can say in so much time, right? It's something. There's some things that is only going to happen after time. I mean, look, you know, we have a saying: you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And at the end of the day, dawah is invitation. Whether it's the actual dawah of inviting a person to be Muslim, or the further dawah of inviting them to practice Islam, what can we do? We can pass on the information. But it's the same with the brothers and sisters in the retreat. If they're not going to take the time to make the tadabbur, you know, to make that deep reflection, that transformation is not going to happen. They have to do it. You can't do that. It's like I always say, it's like you can watch someone in the gym. It's not going to make you any fitter. You have to go there and lift the weights yourself, right? You have to do the work. People have to do the work themselves. So.
Great. I think you mentioned 2 important points: dawah to the shahada and dawah to the implementation of it. From what I've seen around my end, I think in a lot of dawah teams is that the second stage is always usually lacking. So you do the dawah to the shahada, and you wouldn't. A lot of the du'as wouldn't worry too much or would not invest a lot of time in explaining the importance of now walking the path to Allah, as opposed to not just recognizing it, but to walk towards it. And to facilitate it, right? I mean, you can do certain things like a follow-up call, like let's meet once a week to maybe read a few verses or do tadabbur together, or to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like how you invited them to the shahada in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've struggled with even in IERA, and it's been part of our ethos from the day one. When we started IERA from the beginning, it was our ethos that we're not just about dawah. We are about making sure that the people who we give dawah to are looked after, and as much as we can keep them on the deen. And we talked to other organizations who had been involved in dawah and who were well known for street dawah. And you know, what we got from them was the key was education. So the main key to keeping people on the right path is educating them. You didn't really need to make sure they had jobs and housing and, you know, pamper them and take care of all their psychological counseling. It's not. The main thing was if they learned their religion and you gave them that space to learn their religion, then generally, nearly always they stayed upon the deen. And it's failing to, and that's what we try and do. So we've almost, I could say, limited ourselves to making sure that that's something we can provide, because in other ways the needs of a new Muslim can be unlimited, right? And I mean, I suppose if one has that financial viability, well, meet as many needs as you can. But from our perspective, that's what we've chosen to focus on. Like, so that's why we have the retreats, really. Not just that, but we have the step-by-step course. So we have things in place that the du'at, our du'at on the street should put those new Muslims into that system of education. So the first thing they do is when they get Shahada, they should get a welcome pack from us, and a welcome pack contains information on how to pray, 99 names of Allah, translation of the Quran, a small seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a CD on how to pray. I think Husn al-Muslim maybe it has as well. So it has that. It's like a little mini library to get them going. And then it is supposed to be that they are followed up with regular phone calls and meetings and so on and so forth.
Fantastic. I really liked your horse example because as you mentioned about the water, right?
Yeah.
So I think with the education and the retreat, to me that's like the existence of water, right? So resources are in there. But you have to, and I have lots of examples of that where people were given the boxes and the material and the links, but then there was nobody to lead them to the water. So even in this retreat, I met a few brothers that were really transformed by the retreat.
Yeah.
But if I asked them, like, how did you come to the retreat? There's usually someone who actually reached out to them in person.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's basically having this, as you said, like having that sort of follow-up and support system. I think that's a good note to end that. And hopefully the du'as and the teams would take the initiative to think about how the results are coming in and what can they do to save their investment and protect the investment and grow the investment.
Just one thing, bro. The best thing is to use your communities, and this is the reality. Local communities need to get involved. To set up your own support network is just way too resource intensive. There are masjids, there are communities. New Muslims need to be integrated into those communities, and those communities need to take responsibility for looking after them and caring for them.
Fantastic. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.